Hello GenderqueerChat, it's Callie, it's Saturday, and this week the topic is heroes. Now, the word heroes hasn't gone down very well on the channel so far this week, so I thought I would put up a spirited defence of it, and in order to do that, I have brought the greatest tool, the greatest one-volume tool of words, which is the Oxford Dictionary of English. And its definition of hero is as follows. Hero. 1. A person, typically a man, who is admired for their courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. They give the example, a war hero. Can also be the chief male character in a book, play, or film, who is typically identified with good qualities and with whom the reader is expected to sympathise. So, that's a really interesting definition, and it's got a lot of gendered overtones. A hero is typically a man, it says, and it says it's the chief male character in a book, play, or film. The chief female character, of course, being the heroine, or sometimes not. But I like the word hero because you don't have to use words in precisely the way that they have been used in the past. You can take them and you can reappropriate them. And if we take out typically a man from that definition and gender neutralise it to hero, a person who is admired for their courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And it does have a collocation of war. We do think about war and mythic heroes like Achilles, heroes of war. But it doesn't have to be. It can just be someone who is admired for their courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And something about me that you may or may not have been able to glean from my previous vlogs is that I'm a tremendous optimist about human nature. I think people basically want to be good to each other, but that the world grinds them down sometimes if they let it. So, and I am someone who has heroes, people who I admire and idealise, put on their respective pedestals for their exceptional qualities and their noble behaviour, or whatever it was. I put the book away now. For me, the most heroic thing is to be different, to go your own way and stand up for what you believe is right, even when it goes against the grain. If you're an artist, people are always going to tell you that what you do is no good, and if you are differently gendered, then people are always going to tell you that you're not normal and that you should get back in line. And the heroic thing in that situation is not to do that. And the following people who I'm going to list have lives or works who I want my life or work to be like. Here we go. The first, I have mentioned him on the channel before, Quentin Crisp, the wonderful Quentin Crisp, who, if you don't already know who he is, was a flamboyantly effeminate gay man who was born in 1908 and wore makeup and all these sort of flamboyant clothes in London in the 20s and 30s and was hated for it and hounded through streets and beaten up and all sorts. He worked as an artist model and all sorts of things, and but he kept going and he kept doing what he was doing because that was who he was, and I find his courage to be who he was very heroic. And he wrote a book about it, The Naked Civil Servant, which propelled him to this kind of weird fame, and then he moved to America in his 70s, where he lived until the end of his life, and he died in 1999. So he'd lived this entire, virtually the entire 20th century being visibly queer. And, he was loved and adored by the queer community by the end of his life. He's just, I find him to be have found him to be an immense inspiration. My next gender hero, several people have mentioned already. is Kate Bornstein. Although I think she pronounces it Bornstein, actually, now I come to think of it. Author of Gender Outlaw, My Gender Workbook, Hello Cruel World, 101 Alternatives to Suicide. She's a marvellous writer and person. I encourage you actually to, she's got a YouTube channel with a couple of things of her talking, and I encourage you to search her on YouTube because she's really marvellous. And there's one thing that she says, I think it's in Gender Outlaw, that she said, or maybe it's in Hello Cruel World, where she says that you should use fear as a compass. So you use things that you're scared of, you treat that as yourself pointing you towards those things, and then you go and do those things. And I find that to be immensely helpful advice. Like, if you're scared of something, then you should do it, you know. So yeah, Kate Bornstein. And then the next hero, she kind of straddles the two boundaries, the boundary between a gender hero and a scholarly hero, because my next hero is Judith Butler. Judith Butler is a hero because you know, I know her work is really quite academic and inaccessible, but I didn't stop me, and when I read Gender Trouble, that was really something that, you know, I felt this is, you know, the critical theory stuff and the philosophy stuff in it is really hard to get your head around, but the kind of ideas that underpin it, and that the ideas that she's trying to provide a kind of really kind of like deep kind of existential philosophical basis for, are life transforming. So and she gets a lot of stick, Judith Butler, for being difficult to understand. She is difficult to understand, but she's talking about something which is so deeply ingrained in all the kind of ideas, and she's not just trying to deconstruct it at a superficial level, she's trying to get rid of all the kind of stuff that underpins it as well, which requires you to be difficult to understand. So that gets me on to scholarly heroes, and another scholarly hero is the French philosopher and critic Roland Barthes, who so he wrote many books, including The Pleasure of the Text, A Lover's Discourse, his autobiography Roland Barthes by Roland Barthes, Image, Music, Text, Writing Degree Zero, Mythologies. He doesn't write about gender, but he's kind of a kind of literary and cultural critic, and he kind of Mythologies is a book of essays where he examines and deconstructs. You could broadly call him a deconstructive writer, where he examines and deconstructs phenomena in the media and kind of social world. And also he has an essay, The Death of the Author, which is about how it's not really important, the idea of the author, like this kind of big kind of figure who we do kind of idealise and make a hero and put on a pedestal, is a fabrication, is something that we make up out of the author's works. Next hero, Wittgenstein, another big philosopher, another person who's difficult to understand, but I love trying to understand him, and I love his attitude of giving up philosophy for 10 years, going away to Norway to live by himself, refusing to read Aristotle, just believing that mathematics had all these answers, and that philosophy had none of them. I find independent thinkers like Wittgenstein really inspiring. My final category of heroes are literature heroes, and I am a poet, and so I have many heroes who are, well, I read a lot, and I have many literary and artistic, I have many artists who I admire, but I wouldn't call all of them my heroes, because I would only call them heroes if I so much admire them kind of both artistically and personally in this in what Barthes has so rightly pointed out is this kind of construct of the artistic personal thing. But I do have these constructs, and I do make them and use them, and so if I admire them in that constructed way, then I would call them my heroes. But there are writers who I don't admire kind of in that constructed way, but who I do admire, enjoy and admire their work, such as the composer Mahler, and I'm an avid Mahlerian. I don't know that much about music, but I know what I like, and what I like is Mahler, and Nabokov, the novels of Vladimir Nabokov. But in the other category of proper artistic heroes are Virginia Woolf, champion of androgyny and writer of stream of consciousness fiction, and just fabulous feminist foremother and queer foremother, and generally top-notch person. And in particular, her novel Orlando, also big kind of part of my understanding of gender, I think. If you don't know Orlando, I strongly encourage you to. It's about a young Elizabethan boy who lives for 300 years, midway through which he changes gender, and it's a trip. And then there's E. Cummings, who is, I'm sure everyone's heard of him. He's American poet, writes without punctuation or regard for, well, no, with punctuation, but kind of with the wrong punctuation and without regard for spelling and conventions and all that sort of thing, except of course he knows all the conventions and just mixes them up, and it's all part of the rich, enormous tapestry of crazy poems. And E. Cummings is a big influence on sort of breaking and bending and making new with the rules. The last person I want to talk about is the Scottish poet and critic Veronica Forrest-Thomson, who lived in the middle of the 20th century. Tragically died when she was only 28 in 1975, and she was an astonishingly innovative and groundbreaking poet and critic who almost nobody reads anymore, and her books are all out of print. Her critical book Poetic Artifice is out of print, although you can read some of it on Google Books. Her collected poems are also pretty difficult to get hold of, so what I wanted to do was read one of her poems aloud on this video so you can see why I think she's such a big deal, but I'm going to run out of time, so what I'm going to do is do that on a separate video which I'm going to put on my personal channel, and then provide a link so that you can watch me do that if you are so inclined. Also, I want to say that I don't believe that there's some kind of big hero class of people who are automatically better and more inspiring than everybody else. It's this kind of pool of spiritual nourishment that everybody contributes to and everybody can kind of draw on. And I'll give you an example of an act of gender heroism from a friend of mine who she's a cisgendered woman who is heterosexual, but she, over this last summer, shaved her head, just for the shaving of her head, and it's just something that she did, and to me that was something heroic, because it was something that she wanted to do, and she just did it against kind of people told her that it wasn't, that it was unattractive and that it was stupid, and but she didn't care, she did it anyway, and I found that to be an act of social and personal gender heroism, which was very inspiring. So yeah, have a good week and see you next time.